Too late.
Sorry about that.
Damn it.
Oh, how creepy is that? I just said Audacity was not speaking to my iPad, didn't activate anything, and it just popped up on my iPad. That is creepy as fuck. I hate it. I know it's spying on me, but I hate it when it makes itself obvious like that.
Does everybody have Audacity up and ready to start
I
recording?
am now recording.
Not ready.
I'm recording as well.
Go, recording machine, go.
I guess then, Michael McElroy, you sync us up.
Shit.
Okay.
Your leisure.
To sync up today, we're going to say schizophrenia. So,
Ooh, nice.
on the count of three. Sorry, I completely fucked that up. The count of three, not from three. 1, 2, 3. Schizophrenia.
Schizophrenia.
Okay.
All right, then. Welcome, everyone, to the Irreverent Skeptics podcast. Thus today, Mike Bowler.
Hello.
Michael McElroy.
Howdy, howdy.
Erno.
Hola, ¿cómo estás?
Dumbass.
Hey, people.
Brandy.
Hi, how are you?
And I'm John. And today we are talking about bizarre and/or amazing psychology. So for our first topic, let's talk a little bit about dissociative identity disorder, more commonly known to most people as multiple personality disorder. It's an extremely rare mental disorder characterized by at least two distinct and relatively enduring identities or disassociated personality states that alternately control a person's behavior and is accompanied by memory impairment for important information not explained by ordinary forgetfulness. That is one hell of a long sentence.
Mm-hmm.
These symptoms are not accounted for by substance abuse, seizures, or other medical conditions, nor by imaginative play in children. Diagnosis is often difficult as there is considerable comorbidity with other mental disorders. Malingering should be considered if there is possible financial or forensic gain, as well as factitious disorder if help-seeking behavior is prominent. So DID, as we'll call it, is one of the more controversial psychiatric disorders with no clear consensus regarding its diagnosis or treatment. Research on treatment effectiveness still focuses mainly on clinical approaches and case studies. Dissociative symptoms range from common lapses in attention, becoming distracted by something else, and daydreaming to pathological dissociative disorders.
I'm sorry, what were you just saying?
Yeah, exactly.
Distracted and daydreaming.
The voices were talking real loud. Well, that's something else.
Shut up, other me. No systematic, empirically supported definition of dissociation exists. So, Brandy, tell us a little bit about this.
Well, I have a lot to say.
Yeah, there you go, exactly. My more expert half. The thing is about this, I mean, to start off, to say, like, certainly I'm no expert, I'm just an MSW, but largely this is something that has been, if not officially debunked or dismissed, most people in the field would tell you, like, it's not a real thing. The thing is, people come in with this diagnosis already self-identified, sort of, because they want to be a unique, special butterfly, or a therapist labels somebody because they think, oh, how great to have found a special unique little butterfly.
Somewhere.
Yeah, or they've seen Sybil and they're enamored with it or whatever. It's just a neat thing. But it turns out even Sybil, that was not a real case. So, there was the book, the movie, The Famous Therapist, but that should always be a red flag. When someone is a famous therapist because they found this unique butterfly, they have an inherent conflict of interest, they've benefited monetarily or just being famous in the community. And what you find with those people generally, it's not that they've published on the topic or they've done research, it's that they found themselves a unique little butterfly and a pet that they want to show everyone. And it's terribly exploitive of the patient, who usually is a borderline personality person who's experiencing splitting, but there's really nothing to this whole switching of personalities. They have different handwriting, this other personality is left-handed actually, and this other, speaks other languages. There's really nothing to it. Anytime people have been presented for examination by other experts, it just crumbles, it falls apart. So it's mostly a Hollywood thing. It's a device of fiction.
Brian Dunning covered the whole Sybil controversy
absolutely
in episode number 361 of Skeptoid, just a FYI. And
yeah, thank you for that.
it was all about how basically the actual person who was named Sybil in the books, the movies, whatever, she said that a lot of the stuff that they said about her wasn't true, and that they had kind of concocted a story that they told her to respond to and kind of forced the whole thing upon her.
she was victimized by therapists, by people that should have known better and were acting unethically. And then even when she tried to recant, that was not an option because she'd made these people famous, or this person famous, and herself as well. So she was victimized ultimately, over and over again. I mean, we're talking years or even decades, I think, ultimately. So, yeah, there's that.
All right, any other thoughts on that? Moving on then. So a little bit about your memories, about common misconceptions about memories. People tend to think of their memories like recorded videos or files saved on a computer, but as research has learned, that's not the case. The notion of perfect memory is a myth, as Joel Voss, an assistant professor of medical social sciences of neurology at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine, says, quote, "Everyone likes to think of memory as the thing that lets us vividly remember our childhoods or what we did last week. But memory is designed to help us make good decisions in the moment, and therefore memory has to stay up to date. The information that is relevant right now can overwrite what was there to begin with." This goes along with a concept I've heard numerous times where your memories are more of an improvisation on a theme rather than actual recall of specific things that have happened. You rebuild your memories every time you recall something. You rebuild your memories from ideas and bits of memory that you actually have, and what's going on currently with you can very much affect what you recall.
Right, because I mean, your memories of things are going to be incomplete, even if they were recorded and recalled as best as they could be. They're going to be incomplete just because you don't have full access to everything that was going on around you when you remembered stuff. And besides that, your worldview, your beliefs, all that stuff is going to come in and impact your interpretation of things, and then your brain's going to reinterpret the memory and re-encode it, and yeah.
Right. Donna Jo Bridge, a postdoctoral fellow in medical social sciences at Northwestern University Feinberg School of Medicine, says that to help us survive, our memories adapt to an ever-changing environment and help us deal with what's important now. Quote, "Our memory is not like a video camera. Your memory reframes and edits events to create a story to fit your current world. It's built to be current," which goes along with what we were just saying. There's a study at Feinberg that showed participants 168 object locations on a computer screen with varied backgrounds and asked the participants to study the pictures. Participants were then asked to place the object in the original location but with a new background picture, and interestingly, participants always placed the objects in an incorrect position. Quote, "People always chose the location they picked in part 2. Bridge said this shows their original memory of the location has changed to reflect the location they recalled on the new background screen. Their memory has updated the information by inserting the new information into the old memory." There was part of that I didn't quite get. The article I read, I thought maybe I missed something, so I reread it, and I think maybe it just left out a little detail about the study. Nonetheless, it was pretty interesting. A little different study from the Harvard University and University of Virginia. Participants were asked to study pictures of an individual accompanied by 5 facts. This tested the motivation to remember of participants. They were told either before being presented with the pictures, after, or not at all, that there'd be a reward for each correct fact they recalled about the picture. So, for instance, like they'd give a picture of John Smith, and John Smith has a dog, he works for the power company, etc., something like that. And then they're asked to recall these facts later. The study concluded that there was a significant increase in retrieval of facts when the participant knew beforehand that he or she would be compensated for the correct answer. This supports the idea that we have a motivation to remember, as they called it, at the time of commitment to memory, and that plays a large role in the veracity of our memories. Whereas if we're asked to recall something, our motivation to remember, or our motivation there is to recall, and so we try and rebuild that memory, and we're more likely to have a fallacious memory because we have this particular motivation. We're trying to fit this into some particular need at any given time. This has been a fascinating topic that I've read a lot about over the last couple of years. I think the first time I was introduced to this idea was on Radiolab years ago, and ever since then I've just been like, wow, so our memories are not anything like I grew up thinking our memories were, and I've been fascinated by that. And certainly listened to and read a lot of things by different people. Oliver Sacks and V.S. Ramachandran are two guys who have done amazing work and really, really fun stuff to read about in this field. So I highly recommend checking those guys out.
So what you're saying is that it's not like in the movies where you get like the real clear flashbacks of what happened 10 years ago.
Right.
Right.
Right. So we tend to think, we tend to think of our memories like oh, there's this video that we take of what goes on around us, or we store our memories like a file system, and in fact, it just doesn't work that way.
What about those people who have like photographic or eidetic memory? I don't know how it's pronounced.
The official literature, I think, says that photographic memory doesn't exist and all of that. But then there are people like Mary Lou Henner, where you can ask her, where were you on, September 14th, 1978? And she can say, oh, it was a Tuesday. I was with my parents. Who are able to recall the facts and the details, and it's verifiable. So there seem to be people like that as far as anecdotal evidence is, but the official research is, the photographic memory doesn't exist.
So this would probably influence on our take on eyewitness testimony on, let's say, extraordinary circumstances. Like
yeah.
That's exactly what I was going to mention. We mentioned this last week a bit, that when talking about 9/11, that some of the things that people recalled, the witnesses recalled, you have to take it with a grain of salt, not because that witness is motivated to not to recall incorrectly, but that they're just unable to necessarily recall correctly.
So why do we still accept eyewitness testimony in court?
I don't think we do, actually. As I've got experience here, okay? I actually was on a jury on a criminal case where, and the thing that really struck me was the defendant claimed to what kind of set this up. It was a bar fight type situation where these two went outside. The one guy grabs a stick and goes over and beats the other guy with this stick, and all the witnesses said something different. The attacker said he had this little rotten piece of wood. The victim said that he had a baseball bat. All these different, everything had different sizes, and none of them agreed with anything. And the best I could do when I went into the jury room was say, well, this guy had something in his hand, and he beat the guy bloody with it, because we got photos of him. This kid got really beat up real bad, and then this partner came up later with a razor blade and cut the guy's forehead up. But it's like you're sitting. All the stories were so different from all the different witnesses. It was like the best we could tell was it was a possible drug deal that didn't happen, or didn't happen right, and the guy follows him out to beat him up, and that was pretty much the whole story there. But like I said, the witnesses kept coming up with all these different. They saw guns. No one saw guns.
Hey, Mike, I'm sorry to interrupt, but how far away were the witnesses? Were they in the bar? Because how could you mistake a baseball bat for anything else? That's a very distinct shape and size.
They were in the bar. They were outside the bar. I mean, this is.
So they got a pretty good look, actually, or you would think they got a pretty good look, and actually none of them agreed. Yeah. That's so bizarre, because a baseball bat is a very distinct thing.
Yeah.
Well, it could be a pipe, or let's say table leg or something, stool leg.
So it was, you get this verbal information, and you go, well, wait a minute. How are you going to get? How would you get the type of damage this guy had on his face? I mean, because he was all the photos from the hospital. He was all bruised, bloody. There was the one guy who they said that he stepped on, while the guy was down, got on his chest and pulled out a razor blade. And you could see the razor blade cuts across his forehead, and but the guy was all bruised in his face and arms and stuff like that. So it's like, okay, this was not a rotten stick. I mean, I don't care what kind of stick it was. These guys were guilty, but that was the thing that struck me, was that there was all these different stories of people, different personalities coming out, and it was bizarre. And actually, talking to the prosecuting attorney after that, he was like, he was ready to say that this was going to be a loss, that these guys were going to get off because the evidence was just so off the wall. And I told him, well, the thing that got me was that this guy on the stand said that he followed him back to his van with the stick because he was afraid he was going to come back on him and attack him. And I'm like, that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. This guy was definitely going over there to beat the shit out of this guy, and so we sent him to jail.
Huh.
But that's what I saw, and seeing this all play out, and then it's like, because I'm trying to think if there was anything else, because it was really, just everyone. They all had their own little stories, and a lot of the stuff. I mean, I was watching both the prosecutor and the defense attorney face. I mean, it was literally, oh my God, this is stupid.
I don't have. I've been on jury duty twice. One was a criminal case, but there was a plea done pretty quickly in the beginning of the proceedings. The other was a malpractice case. There was a little bit of, I guess there was some eyewitness testimony on that, whereas one or two people would be like, oh, this person told me this or told me that. Most of it, though, was evidence, with some kind of record, medical records or paper trails of this or that sort. So I guess my experience in terms of the legal proceedings are pretty shallow in that. Although I as I recall, in this particular case, I guess most of the eyewitness testimony, the plaintiff and the defendant pretty much matched up. So it was a matter of, what this person said and did okay or not. Not so much did this person recall correctly or not.
I think
how helpful that is.
In a jury system, it's even more dangerous because in Finland we don't have a jury system, so there's like professionals on the other side of the witness. But in a jury system, when you hear someone describing an eyewitness situation, I think that might affect the jury greatly, because they're people, and people think that eyewitness testimony is the best evidence, basically.
So before we move on to our next topic, I want to hit some of the questions and comments we have here. So Darlin Eufrazio Ramos says hello. So, hello. Darlin. Sorry if I mispronounced your name. Ben Casper says, I've had a lot of false memories. Well, thanks, Ben, and I think we all have, probably, whether we realize it or not.
Let me jump in here. I'd say any married people, as far as false memories goes, you find when you're married, when you have an account, you go to tell a third party or you're at a gathering and you go to tell a story, you find this person whom you're married to, who was next to you when this thing happened, has a whole different account of it, and that's just sort of a casual example of, like, wait, one of us has to be wrong. These things cannot be right. These are mutually exclusive ideas. And if you talk about, like, oh, what were you wearing when we met, or what song was playing, you talk about memories that you share together, and you realize, yeah, memories are not a video recording of what happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've experienced that, and I think that particular case, that concept of that particular kind of case, is the first time I was ever introduced to this idea that our memories are way more spotty than we tend to think they are.
They're malleable, and we don't realize that.
Yeah, they're very much so.
Changeable and whatnot.
So Torsten Phil, there's a name I recognize. He asked, any discussion on false memories? When I discovered a verifiable false memory of my own, it was both fascinating and kind of creepy. Sure. Michael McElroy, you're an expert on false memories, right?
I seem to recall that I am, but
Well,
I'm not
there
sure.
you go. So tell us all about this.
Okay, I will tell you all about this. Am I supposed to be reading something from the script right now? I'm sorry.
No, I was just throwing you under the bus.
Okay. I was like, what the hell's going on?
No, it's just me.
No,
It's
false
like,
memories.
I should have something to say about this. Make somebody else flounder for a minute.
My false expertise is that I know that pretty much everyone has them, and you know, there's no guarantee that how sure you are that your memory is true is actually an indicator that it is true, or that you're getting the details right. I mean, often it's not very common that you'll find somebody who just concocts an entire memory out of whole cloth, but it's usually, I guess, finer points, details like who you were with, or what time of day it was, what you were doing, stuff like that can differ. Which is, I know that the whole JFK thing, or the Challenger explosion, those are a couple of big historical events that people say they remember where they were when they heard about it, and I often wonder just how accurately they're recalling things, because it's the drama of such an event can make it stick out in your mind and give it a more grandiose sense than I guess not that it deserves, but the more grandiose the event is, the more likely you are to re-dramatize it when you remember things. So, and I know that there was it's not, I guess it's kind of tangentially related to false memories, but the whole repressed memory thing.
That's what I was going to mention, yeah.
Yeah, there was I know there was a big kind of epidemic of people claiming repressed memories of all sorts of child abuse and satanic stuff going on back in the 80s, and you know, all of it kind of became a media panic about how there were satanic cults trying to recruit our children.
It was in daycare centers around the country, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, all sorts of people claiming that they were remembering child abuse that never actually happened, but it was
and
kind
people went to prison. There was a whole family
yeah.
that ran a daycare, went to prison.
And in some instances, it was just a matter of, you know, somebody says something like in a clinical setting, like a psychiatric setting, and kind of leads the people in remembering things that didn't actually happen.
I read a story about, I don't remember the girl's name, but it was basically about how this was an interrogator, a police interrogator or detective that had interrogated this girl about some crime that he thought she had participated in or had witnessed, and she went from, I don't know anything about this, I really wasn't involved, and I don't know anything about it, to making statements about her involvement in details about what had happened, that she had been there. And as he goes back and looks over this testimony, or not testimony, but over these interview notes and listens to the recordings, he realizes, like, as time goes on in this interview, she's repeating back things to him that he had asked her, like, didn't you guys go eat this particular type of food on that night? And at first she's like, no, I didn't do that. Whereas later on, she's like, yeah, I went and ate this exact same thing that he had just said earlier. And her memories, as this interview goes on, start to shape themselves by what he has already asked leading. He's asked leading questions or made insinuations. Yeah. It's certainly, it was interesting to read that. And I guess he had gone back and talked to this girl about that. I think, wasn't that also...
It was a Radio Lab or This American Life or one of those. Yeah, it was, because I remember the thing about shrimp. I mean, he didn't just prime her. He fed her specific details about, you stole this person's credit card and went and got shrimp Chinese food and all this other stuff, and none of it was true. And as you went back and they played the tapes of it or the transcripts or somehow, anyway, went back, realized, like, yeah, this was fed to her bit by bit, and it ruined her life.
Here you go. Right here's a good example. Like, I recall I read something about that. Now I may have heard that and gone and read about it. That I do that often. But now
we heard it on a podcast.
I know I heard it on a podcast. Or now I think I heard it on a podcast. Brandy says we heard it on a podcast. So did I also read it, or do I just remember hearing it? I'm not really sure.
Next time you're talking about this, you're going to say that you heard it on a podcast.
So I guess what I've just proved here is I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. So, Jacob Eitner, welcome back to watching the show. He asked, could a tendency towards long-term thinking come into play with memory retention? Could long-term effects be seen as adequate incentive to remember and to learn? Learning is the same as remembering? Is there a distinction? Sorry for the bad wording. That particular study, the Harvard and University of Virginia study I was talking about, kind of talks about this, like if you have an incentive to remember something later. So if we're talking about something and I know that later it will benefit me to remember this, I'm more likely to remember it more accurately than if I just say something just off the cuff, and someone asks me about it later. My incentive then is to recall and rebuild that memory rather than, whereas beforehand I'm like, oh, I'm gonna commit this to memory so that later I'll have an accurate recollection of it. So that seems to be the case, that if you memorize something with the intent of recalling it accurately later, you're more likely to have an accurate recollection. I hope that answers your questions there. Elias Rodriguez says, "How are you?" I myself, I'm doing pretty well.
I'm fine.
Torsten had a little clarification. He says, "I'll expand on my verifiable false memory. There's a part of my house where I remember there being an outlet. There is no outlet there. The false memory has not gone away yet, even though it's clearly wrong over the years." I've had memories like that too, where, like, wasn't there a building here years ago? And there's very clearly not a building there, and I'll ask someone else, did there not used to be this particular building over here? They look at me like I'm crazy. No, there was never that building there. I'm convinced that it's just aliens moving things around when we're not looking. So.
If you're a doctor,
prove me wrong.
If you're a doctor, you like the silence.
It's a change in the matrix.
Yeah, prove me wrong. Thank you very much. Checkmate skeptics.
You, sir, are obviously completely unaware of gnomes.
I am unaware of gnomes.
I just want to mention it. You don't have it in the show notes, but the one thing that is really fascinating is how easy it is to manipulate the memories of children, such as in the McMartin preschool case from the 80s.
Right.
Where, just you can get children to, just by questioning them in a certain way, get them to get false memories about certain events and memories that they're going to believe for the rest of their lives a lot of the time.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so moving on to our next topic, Stockholm Syndrome. Named after the...
What's that?
I cannot say this word, I'm so sorry.
I can.
Okay.
I speak Swedish.
Norrmalmstorg.
I'm going to then take it away.
Norrmalmstorg.
Norrmalmstorg.
Right, robbery of Kreditbanken in Stockholm, Sweden. Yeah, I should just let you guys read this instead.
Credit bank.
To that, I say meta.
Nice.
Mitta.
Okay, so anyway, there's a bank in Stockholm, Sweden, in August of '73 that was robbed. Several bank employees were being held captive in a bank vault while the captors negotiated with police. During that time, the captives developed an emotional bond with their captors. They rejected assistance from government officials. They defended their captors after they were released. And the term coined by a criminologist and psychiatrist, Niels Bejerot, as I don't know. I can't say this. I can't say the name of this syndrome, but anyway, it became known as Stockholm Syndrome around the world.
Norrmalmstorg-syndromet.
That. Stockholm Syndrome is a form of traumatic bonding in which hostages express empathy and sympathy towards their captors. These feelings are generally considered irrational in light of the danger or risk endured by the victims, who essentially mistake a lack of abuse from their captors for an act of kindness. One commonly used hypothesis to explain the effect of Stockholm Syndrome is based on Freudian theory. It suggests that the bonding is the individual's response to trauma and becoming a victim. Identifying with the aggressor is one way that the ego defends itself. When the victim believes the same values as the aggressor, they cease to be a threat.
Although the fact that it's based on Freudian theory kind of makes me wonder about it, as I know that Freud was not so much an empiricist on a lot of the things he claimed about psychoanalysis.
Sure. That makes sense. I mean, he wasn't a researcher. He was a pioneer, and pioneers tend to say the first words on a subject, certainly not the last. But if you just look at it on its surface, it has a kind of face validity. If you can identify with your captor, if you can kind of say, yeah, well, the people that are supposed to love me and protect me are not coming to rescue me, which was the case with Patty Hearst. Like, I have a wealthy father. I have all these people that are supposed to, be able to help me and care about me, and they're doing nothing. These guys seem reasonable, and I can see why they're upset about this given situation. And you can kind of just see on its surface how it would be a lot better psychologically if you could align with your captors instead of being constantly fear and terror. And also psychologically, if you can bond with them, they're less likely to hurt you. So I think that might be part of it. That's why it's under the traumatic bonding category.
Speaking of Patty Hearst, let's talk about some famous examples of Stockholm Syndrome. First, Patty Hearst.
No shit.
Kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army in 1974, Patty Hearst voluntarily participated in a heist of the Sunset District branch of the Hibernia Bank in San Francisco, where she was arrested, tried, and convicted for her part in the robbery, but her sentence was later commuted after 2 years by then-President Jimmy Carter. And like Brandy had said, while she was being held captive, her captors made certain demands of the family, which it was, I think it was $6 million in aid was supposed to be sent to whatever particular peoples this was, and the cost of doing that was going to be far higher. The family complied to some extent, but Patty Hearst expressed that she didn't think they had done enough. They could have done more. So I don't know. There's a lot more to be said about that. There's a link to some stories about Patty Hearst in the show notes, so if you want to read more. A more recent example is J.C. Lee Dugard, lured from a bus stop in 1991 at the age of 11 by Philip and Nancy Garrido. She was held captive in their home for 18 years. At that time, she gave birth to 2 children, daughters, who were ages 11 and 15 at the time of her reappearance. It's just terrible. So I guess that means at 14 she had her first child. Philip Garrido was sentenced to 431 years of imprisonment, and his wife Nancy to 36 to life for their parts in this story. Now, there's a lot of really interesting things about this. Reading it, and a lot of really terrible parts of the story, so feel free to go read that. One of the things that I did find interesting was, this is something that I've discussed before with Brandy to some extent, was that the wife of Philip Garrido viewed the captor, J.C. Lee Dugard, as, I guess, kind of an interloper. Like, she blamed the captor for what was going on rather than blaming the husband, who's this
certainly she was like
criminal.
Just to clarify, you keep
fuckhead.
saying captor instead of captive. You called the kidnapping victim a captor.
Oh, accidentally. Yep,
I can't English.
I can't English.
I can't language.
She was seen as the in-house mistress, really, instead of being a victim by the wife, by the kidnapper's wife. She would have been.
Wow.
My understanding of that would have been like, oh, you and your girlfriend out back, rather than you and this person you forced to be out back of our house.
And I know at one point, like, if I recall correctly, the first time that Nancy Garrido interacted with J.C. Lee Dugard was when she brought her chocolate milk and cookies, which was an act of kindness, but then would switch back and forth from something kind to very hostile and mean. And it's a terrible story, but it is a good example of.
This reminds me of a story I read. I don't remember who it was, but there was somebody who told the story about how she was trying to get a modeling career going, and she wound up getting involved with this couple who were like the head of a professional modeling agency, who promised her all sorts of modeling gigs and whatever, and they ended up just psychologically and sexually and physically abusing her, and she felt like she needed to please them, and she was doing something wrong to get treated the way they convinced her that she was at fault for what was happening to her, and it was really weird. I don't remember. I gotta find out who that was.
I wonder if that's would be common in cases in sex trafficking or human trafficking in general.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. Make them feel like you're doing them a favor.
It's speculative, but
it's common for young girls, especially the stereotype of the young runaway being caught up with a pimp, who's waiting at the bus station, that kind of thing. It's very common for them to refer to their pimp as their boyfriend, and for him to have sex with her right away, because then she develops a loyalty. Because young girls, being especially sentimental and naive and all of that, will be turned out because it earns them money, when really it's just a matter of a mechanism to get her to cooperate. And they don't testify against their pimps, even though they take beatings and they've been turned out, all of that. And that's part of what that's about.
This accurately describes my relationship with corporate America.
The thing that kind of gets me about...
I'll just see myself out.
Come on, baby, don't be like
and
that.
This would be a good time to say hate mail and death threats. You could go to irreverentskeptics.com.
Yes, feedback at
irreverentskeptics.com for all your hate mail and death threats.
And John Ombie will respond.
I will respond. I will personally respond to all of them on the next show.
Have we
I
gotten
think my
any?
brain is kind of missing the point on this one, because the only thing I keep on thinking is 435 years. I wonder how that works. Like, people like happy, oh, I got it, or like they're upset, I got 435. I was hoping for 200. You know.
Right.
The way I see it is,
once you get past 100, it's kind of a waste.
I think that, you know, with good behavior and other things, you can get paroled after a certain number of years, perhaps, right? Well, in this case, with 435 years before you would be available for parole, pretty sure you'd be dead by then. And I think I'm not an expert on that, but I
think that's how biology works. Yeah.
If Futurama has
For now,
taught us
anyway.
anything, he'll be a brain in a jar, or a head in a jar.
Yeah, with his luck, we're going to find the singularity, and he's going to become a robot brain man and whatever.
Yeah,
I've seen
after
that.
the
It's a
400
subject for a
years of
podcast.
jail
I think I've seen that
he'll
movie.
probably be pretty normal after that.
Richard Nixon,
So-
Futurama.
Our next example of Stockholm Syndrome is Mary McElroy. No relation to Michael McElroy, presumably.
No, none at all. Thank you.
Okay. In 1933, Mary McElroy was kidnapped and held for ransom by 4 people. After being released unharmed, Mary mistook the kidnappers' lack of abuse for friendship and suffered bouts of guilt when 3 out of her 4 captors were given maximum sentences, one including death. She went so far as to defend them in their court proceedings. I didn't do a whole lot of reading about this. It was kind of a summary story of hers I read. Our next and last example is Elizabeth Smart, kidnapped at age 14 by Wanda Barzee and Brian David Mitchell. Elizabeth was held for 9 months in a makeshift shelter in Dry Creek Canyon, Salt Lake City, Utah. Whether or not Stockholm Syndrome was in play here is a little speculative, as it tends to be an assumption. Skeptics will speculate that if Elizabeth had been suffering Stockholm Syndrome, she would more likely have put up a fight with her authorities.
Yeah, I don't
with
think
authorities
that's a good case.
when they went to free her from her captors. I don't know.
That's not a good case of it. She actively spoke out against them, at least to her family, and she cooperated with police immediately. There's no signs of that. And then she goes on to write a book describing what monsters they were in graphic detail. It doesn't sound like all she was doing as far as cooperating, you know, she walked among people and she could have said something. All she was doing was she was overestimating their ability to be dangerous people. She was cooperating out of fear. It was fear-based cooperation, not Stockholm Syndrome. She spoke out way too much to be a Stockholm Syndrome victim.
And next, now we get to what I think are really the more bizarre of the psychological disorders, I guess. Diogenes syndrome, a condition characterized by extreme self-neglect, reclusive tendencies, and compulsive hoarding. It's generally associated with senior citizens, associated with senile breakdown, and is exploited on television for entertainment purposes of those with nothing better to do than watch metaphorical train wrecks, make smug, condescending remarks about the subject of said television show.
I love hoarders and extreme hoarders and animal hoarders. Thank you very much.
So, an abstract of a clinical study says a study of elderly patients. I'm going to restart.
I wonder if you could sell the show Hoarders.
People who hoard hoarders or hoard episodes of DVDs of hoarders.
Is that metal hoarders? Is that what that is?
Metal hoarders.
No, not metal hoarders. Oh, never mind. I've got 300 copies of that album back here. Okay. An abstract of a clinical study. A study of elderly patients, 14 men, 16 women, were admitted to hospital with acute illness and extreme self-neglect, revealed common features which might be called Diogenes syndrome. All had dirty, untidy homes and a filthy personal appearance about which they showed no shame. Hoarding of rubbish, silogomania, I think, was sometimes seen. All except 2 lived alone, but poverty and poor housing standards were not a serious problem. All were known to the social services departments, and a third had persistently refused offers of help. An acute presentation with falls or collapse was common, and several physical diagnoses could be made. Multiple deficiency states were found, including iron, folate, vitamin B12, etc., etc. The mortality, especially for women, was high, 46%. Most of the survivors responded well and were discharged. Half showed no evidence of psychiatric disorder and possessed higher than average intelligence. Many had led successful professional and business lives with good family backgrounds and upbringing. Personality characteristics show them to tend to be aloof, suspicious, emotionally labial, aggressive, group-dependent, and reality-distorting individuals. It is suggested that this syndrome... Labile, for fuck's sake. I can't English. I already said that once. It is suggested that this syndrome may be a reaction late in life to stress in certain types of personalities. Something that I thought was worth mentioning is that I've heard people who watch Hoarders, not Michael McElroy, but other people who seem to talk about these people on the show as if they're less intelligent because they do this thing.
No, I feel bad for them.
Yeah. I would say there's no. It doesn't equate being less intelligent with having some obvious syndrome or disorder. Those two things are not. Those two things are not necessarily.
Yeah, and it always frustrates me when I watch episodes where connected. The family members don't seem to understand that this is a psychological condition, and they just act like the parent or whoever should be acting normally, and just being stubborn. No, there's something going on in their brain. It's not normal.
So our next disorder is abulimania, which is one of my favorite named ones. A disorder in which the sufferer displays pathological indecisiveness. Typically, it's associated with anxiety, stress, depression, mental anguish, and trying to complete Fallout New Vegas on any given character path. As any of us who have played that will know.
I've played that game 4 times through.
Is it Caesar or Mr. House, or maybe it's the Cons this time? Fuck, I don't know.
I beat that game with every faction on evil and good karma, so yeah, I don't have this disorder.
I thought I was a fan. Holy shit! Really?
I saved at every single place that
you didn't play it. You didn't replay it every time. Oh, no. Boo! See, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm working on a new playthrough for every time. I may never finish that quest. So, sufferers may become overwhelmed by too many pieces of information when trying to make decisions, regardless of the importance of the decision. They will generate numerous reasons that their decisions will turn out badly, causing them to overanalyze, leading to paralysis by analysis. I don't know if it's an actual thing or just some fancy coined term. Also, is overanalyze, is that, like I said, is that something like you could officially say, oh, you overanalyze that? I tend to think of that as something we just kind of say to people, one another, oh, you're just overanalyzing something. Is that an official thing?
I don't know. Are you asking if there's an official level of analysis that's proper?
That'd be a good way to put it. Or is there a line you can cross where one would say, like maybe a psychoanalyst or a therapist would be like, you're overanalyzing at this point?
I think overanalyzing might lead to hyperactive pattern detection and paranoia. Yeah, if you see somebody who's analyzing every situation as some sort of scheme against them, then yeah, I'd say they could be overanalyzing.
A scheme, you say?
A scheme, a plot, yes. A huskow. No, that's not right.
A treason.
A scandal.
So as I'm reading this this description and these stories about abulimania, I was like, there are times when I kind of identify with this, although not in a I can't live my life because I can't make decisions kind of way. Just there are many times where I'm like, I've got an overload of information here, and I don't know what to do with it. I'm just not doing anything.
Yeah, I think that people who are some kind of philosophers specializing in morality should be like that. Oh God, am I doing the right thing or the wrong thing? And then they're completely paralyzed.
So another one of the fun syndromes here, Taijin Kyofusho. It's most widespread in Japan, and in fact, it might just be culture-bound specifically to Japan. This condition is characterized by a crippling fear of social interaction. There seems to be some question about whether or not it's Japanese culture-bound specifically, although from what I've read, there are similar cases in other cultures, but this, I guess, happens most often in Japan and is most attributed to that. I was reading a letter to the editor of the American Journal of Psychiatry, and a quote from that response to it was, In the indigenous Japanese diagnostic system, depending on the content of the patient's fear that they will displease or embarrass others, Taijin Kyofusho is classified into 4 subtypes. Sekimin Kyofu, the phobia of blushing, which apparently is a very common phobia in social interactions internationally, not just in Japan. Shubo Kyofu, the phobia of a deformed body. Jaikoshisen Kyofu, the phobia of eye-to-eye contact.
This is adorable, by the way.
Yeah, piss off. And Chikoshu Kyofu, the phobia of one's own foul body odor.
This is
a great time for fart jokes if anyone's got any right now.
Chickens have a foul body odor.
I'm not sure what you're trying to say there.
FOWL, foul. It's a pun.
Wah, wah, wah. I was thinking, so maybe what I should do for episodes like this, I should try and find people internationally to come in and read these particular segments. Someone who speaks the native language of whatever topic this is.
So, yeah.
So any thoughts on thoughts on this? This one's interesting. I guess what happens here is if I suffer from this, I'm so afraid that I'm going to commit some social faux pas that it's just crippling. I can't go out and interact with people. I assume this leads to some types of shut-ins, or at least people who will avoid any kind of contact with people around them. All right, fair enough. So our next one, Riley Day syndrome, also known as familial.
Sorry. I was going to say before they actually have a name for that, for the shut-ins. It's hikikomori. It's a Japanese word for people who... Wow. Wow. Okay.
See, I said that right.
Hikikomori is literally pulling inward or being confined, and it's acute social withdrawal. They have a term. It's reclusive adolescents or adults who withdraw from social life, often seeking extreme degrees of isolation and confinement. It's both the phenomenon and the people are hikikomori.
It bears noting, often I can pronounce these things just fine if it were me and someone else just talking, but here I am, broadcasting this to however many people are going to watch it, and professionalism. I'm fumbling my words. So, God damn it.
And we're mocking you for it.
So it sounds like
that helps.
You have a podcast version of this fear of making mistakes or embarrassing others or making social faux pas.
Can we get an official name for that?
He wouldn't be doing it.
Well, it's not a crippling fear. It's a fear, just not a crippling fear. That's all.
He would just never talk.
Speaking of pulling inward and of culture-specific phobias and stuff,
damn,
I just posted a link.
That's a segue. Damn.
I usually
just posted a link in there.
Oh, that's so funny. Koro is so funny. You have to talk about that.
Yeah. No, you guys just reminded me of that. I'm like, oh yeah. So I found it and posted it. It's basically a fear that your genitals are shrinking into your body, specifically the male penis shrinking into into your body, and it's certain cultures experience it more than others, and it comes in it can be kind of a little epidemic of it happening, and people. I understand people have actually had loved ones hold on to their penis while they sleep to prevent it from shrinking into their bodies.
They say, yeah.
So it's just a cool name for shrimpage.
No, they actually
that's
think
the
it's
thing
retracting up. The testicles too, I think, are retracting up into the body cavity itself.
But the thing is, it's not actually
happening.
happening.
Like shrinkage is a legitimate thing. So if I go jump in a freezing pool, I can expect some shrinkage. That's legitimate. This is like I just have this fear that my genitals are going to totally retract.
Or you actually
think
they
it's not
are.
fear, it's a belief. They will try to convince medical personnel that it has happened, even though it is clearly obviously not happened.
It tends to become a mass delusion as well. There's whole villages where people think that their genitals have been stolen.
But Doc, I swear it was a foot last week.
Well, it's all fun and games though until they blame a witch and that person gets destroyed or killed or imprisoned or whatever. This mass delusion tends to end up with pitchforks and blaming someone, and it starts off funny and ends terribly.
Which
people actually think that
if Glenn Beck's right, don't listen to Katy Perry. I'm just saying.
God.
People think that when the penis, retracts in fully, that they're going to die. So, it's not just a case of, they're going to lose their genitals. They think it's, deathly serious.
Precious bodily fluids.
You're hot and you're cold, yes.
Oh my.
Kitty.
Okay, so moving on. Riley Day syndrome, also known as familial dysautonomia, a genetically inherited disorder, is a syndrome that affects the autonomous nervous system. Symptoms include breath-holding spells that can lead to loss of consciousness, constipation, decrease in sense of taste, diarrhea, dry eyes, feeding problems, lack of tears when crying, long and frequent periods of vomiting, poor coordination and unsteady walk, poor growth, repeated fevers, repeated pneumonia, seizures, skin blotching, sweating while eating, unusually smooth, pale tongue surface, and most notably, persons afflicted with this disorder are almost entirely insensitive to pain and temperature change.
That would suck.
Yeah, see, at first you think, oh, that's cool, I don't feel any pain, but that's really a problem. Like, oh, I didn't realize that I was standing on this,
Oh, hey, I
super
broke
hot
my
metal
ankle
and
and
it's
didn't
burning my
notice.
feet, or yeah, something like that. So I had heard of this before. This I had not heard. It's seen almost exclusively in the Ashkenazi Jews and is inherited in an
wow.
autosomal recessive fashion. I had to know what that meant, autosomal recessive fashion.
We'll just
I
assume
read a
that
bit
our
about
audience
that.
knows.
It's a bit complicated, and I'm not going to go into the explanation. There's a link in our show notes if you want to read about that. I feel like I'd just sound like more of an idiot if I tried to tell you what that all means exactly.
I seem to remember one of those daytime talk shows like Ricky Lake or Jerry Springer or something. I think probably more of the sensitive ones like Maury Povich had an episode on where they had kids that had this disorder, and the parents were talking about how like one of them fell out of a bunk bed and broke his ankle and didn't realize it and tried to walk on it, and they kept trying to convince him that he needs to stop this. It's like when he's 5 years old and he doesn't understand that he's missing some sensation. How do you tell them what you're doing is going to hurt yourself? Or how do you teach a kid not to touch a hot stove if he can't tell that he's hurting himself by doing it? It's
this isn't just like the culturally chic, I have a high threshold for pain kind of thing. It's I have no sensation of pain, which that's fucking problematic.
These people that have this, they'll break their teeth, because if you think about, like, you adjust,
Oh, yeah.
you know, how you sense things in your mouth is kind of how, like, oh, this is too hot, I shouldn't bite into it. All of those things that we adjust by sensation, they don't do. So they have severe burns, they break things, like Mike was saying, without knowing it. Then they walk around on a sprain because they have no idea, and the next thing you know, like, the foot goes completely crooked and they've broken it. It's awful, though, because sometimes the parents get investigated for child abuse because the severity of the injuries the kids come in with, and really a lot of times no explanation, because the kid will be out playing and have no idea that they've sprained themselves or done this or that or been bruised up. And so
until they find it later.
Yeah, and the parents don't have an explanation, or they get turned in by a teacher or whatever. And because there's no story, parents often get investigated because it is rather rare.
Could they use more of their strength, since our strength is kind of limited by the pain we inflict to ourselves when we're doing something?
That's a good point.
That's too hard.
I would think so, but to your own demise, I suppose. Like,
yeah, they could exert themselves to the point of where their muscles are starting to fall apart and they wouldn't even notice.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
So in this disorder, if both parents are carriers, there's a 1 in 4 chance with each pregnancy for an affected child. Worldwide, there's been approximately 600 diagnoses recorded since the discovery of the disease, with approximately 350 of them still living as of 2004. There's also a link in the show notes to this summary of some facts about this that I found pretty interesting.
Yeah. The others are probably dead because of too much masturbation.
Oh, Jesus God.
The chafing never hurt. I didn't realize. What?
Oh, the skin's supposed to stay on?
Oh, my. So moving on to what I think is Brandy's favorite condition, calfgrass delusion.
Yeah, that's pretty fantastic.
You're not going to make me talk about that. No, I'm just going to.
Oh, yes, I am. I'm going to prod you on this one. Yes.
No, you're a shitster. I just want you to know, John, you're a shitster.
Calfgrass delusion is a condition where a person holds a delusional belief that an acquaintance, usually a spouse or close family member, has been replaced by an identical-looking imposter. It's most common in patients with schizophrenia, although it also occurs in those who suffer dementia or have suffered a severe brain injury. Quote, Capgras syndrome is what's known as a delusional misidentification. It's the opposite of deja vu, sort of. People with Capgras syndrome think that their spouse, family members, or even pets have been replaced with doubles. Imagine how disconcerting it would be to have someone who looks like a loved one sit down with you and know intimate details about your life, even though you're sure that this person is a trickster. That was
Take off
from
your
the
mask.
that was from the HowStuffWorks.com rather long article about Capgras. Capgras was first described by two French doctors, Joseph Capgras and Jean Ribault-Lachaud. I think I got that right this time. Wasn't eloquent, but tell me someone else heard that just now.
Thank you, Erno.
Don't edit that out.
That is staying in the episode.
Yes.
You give a shit, I don't give a shit.
I know it's just to break everyone. So anyway, let me restart this. Capgras was first described by two French doctors.
A piece in 3 movements.
Joseph Capgras and Jean. Oh, fuck.
A few more piss jokes, right?
Oh, God, we're never going to get through this. Anyway, fuck. It used to be considered rare, but more recently Professionals think it's more common. The more they learn about it, the more they recognize these symptoms in more patients and clients. William Herstein and V.S. Ramachandran have proposed that Capgras syndrome is a problem of memory management. They give this example. Think of a computer. You make a new file and you save it. When you want that information, you open the old file, add to it, save it, and close it again. Perhaps people with Capgras keep creating new files instead of accessing the old one, so that when you leave the room and re-enter, you're a new person, a person who looks like the one who left, but slightly different. Maybe your ears look different, or your hair a different hue. There's still a lot of science that doesn't know about human memory. This kind of ties a little bit back into what we were talking about earlier. And those two guys, William Herstein and V.S. Ramachandran, are both very brilliant researchers, and I intend to read more about this particular study in this case. So, Brandon, you have thoughts on this? Come on.
The theory I've heard about this is that your emotions play a big part in how you recognize people, and if something's wrong with the emotional system in your brain, where you don't feel the emotion that you think you should be feeling when you're looking at another person's face, that will cause you to think there's something wrong there. This must not be that person.
Right, and there are two interesting things to add to this. One is it's not just people. It tends to be people very close to you. So this is a matter of like, oh, you're not actually my mother, you're not actually my husband. It's that kind of thing. People very close, like you were saying, Chris, that you should have a strong bond with, that you don't sort of feel that. And the brain always has to have an explanation for things. So it automatically goes to, you're not who you're supposed to be. So that's one thing. The other thing is it can disappear with phone calls. It's not an audio thing. So if the same person goes in the next room and makes a call from their cell phone and you can't see them, when you get the call, you recognize, oh, this is mom, this is husband, whoever, and everything is fine. It's the sight of the person that doesn't connect right, and there's something about it. And then it goes even further that the person who's suffering the syndrome can become violent. This is why I get on a soapbox about it. Like, these are people impossible to deal with because they are dangerous to these people, their loved ones. When they go home from the hospital, they are dangerous to these people that they have this delusion about and will do something about it rather extreme. Not like leave, usually. They usually want to physically do something to that person. And it's awful, and it doesn't go away as far as just sort of naturally evaporate over time. This is something that people live with for years and can torture the people that are close to them and that love them. And then when they talk on the phone, everything's fine. It's just the in-person family life becomes a hell realm. But it can also spread to dogs. Like, I remember seeing a case where I believe it was a woman, or no, sorry, it was a young man who was convinced his dog had been replaced, that something had happened to his dog, and so his family had, tried to hide it from him and got him a replacement poodle, and that this was not the actual poodle.
Oh, no, this is Sparky. He's just changed his breed and his hair color and is much younger.
Well, that's the thing he was saying, is it was the kind of dog like a poodle where you could find one that looks very much like it, and he was just convinced that, oh, they have replaced my dog, and he was mad at everyone for lying to him and keeping the death of his beloved dog away from him. John, you can't get me to talk crazy. This is going to be recorded for posterity.
No, that was fantastic.
No, so you want me to go crazy. I know you.
No. So we have two of the same question by Leonardo Gallardo and Eco Hotel Kipara. Sorry if I just butchered your name. They both asked, ¿De qué hablan? Not me, sorry.
¿De qué hablan? What are we talking about? We are talking about... Estamos hablando sobre psicología. I don't know how to say that in Spanish.
I can't Spanish, or I would try.
We are multicultural. Check us out.
3 years of Spanish class.
So this next one is a little less of actual disorder and a little more of fucking annoying. It's the perceived chic of competitive mental disorders, a.k.a. the mental humble brag.
A.k.a. the Tumblrite.
The Tumblrite.
I'm a multiple system dragon person who's really secretly a wolf in hiding.
I'm a paladin.
Yeah, the sort of crap you run into on Tumblr where people talk about how they're what do they call themselves otherkin. They think they're really an animal in a human body or something.
What? I thought you were kidding.
No,
What?
What I'm talking in this case, what I'm talking about is more like people who I've met people who would be like, oh yeah, I have OCD. It's like, oh, you do, huh? It's like,
I'm so
yeah,
OCD.
No, not just that. Not there's that. There's like, oh, I'm so OCD. There's that. But this is like, I had a friend. I won't mention names, but I had this friend years ago who tried to convince me that he was legitimately obsessive compulsive. I said, you don't have OCD. He's like, oh yeah, I do. I said, this doesn't at all impede your daily life. It does not complicate your ability to function on a day-to-day basis. That's just you're persnickety and have high attention to detail. You're not obsessive compulsive. There's that, and people who will blame attention deficit disorder for just not paying attention to you or not being interested in a topic. Things like that. It's like, and people who wear these things like they're a badge. Like,
I'm sorry, what were you saying? What? Huh? I'm sorry, I'm ADD.
I'd just like to say that as of last night, I coined a term for this. I call it attention-seeking nuisance disorder. That's if I can copyright that or TM that, I'm so gonna.
This is pretty much like Munchausen or Munchausen by proxy.
Well, yeah, with Munchausen, a person will actively harm Munchausen by proxy. They'll like actually harm their child, for instance, to get attention and help from medical personnel. It's a little different than this. This is kind of like a Munchausen light, I guess you could call it. It's like, oh, but I really have this problem. Shouldn't you feel bad for me, or you should think it's awesome because I have this problem?
Yeah, it's more about the superpowers. It's more about, I'm a unique little butterfly with superpowers, and I should have control of this situation. For instance, oh, you need to fold the towels that way because I'm so OCD. It tends to be a way of like trying to use it as a trump card. Like, I get my way because I have this thing. Mm-hmm. But it's never a shameful thing. It's never like, oh, I'm so pica, I eat the dust off the blinds. No, it's always, I'm so OCD, you should be more organized, you should bow to my will.
Okay. So some of the things that I've seen or heard people try to attribute to this are OCD, ADD, ADHD, sociopathy, psychopathy. Why the fuck you'd want to claim proudly that you have either of those, I don't know. Autism and Asperger's, or as South Park put it, Asperger's.
Yeah, but
one of my favorite episodes, just because Cartman's stuffing burgers down his pants because he doesn't understand what Asperger's means.
Yeah, basically, high-functioning sociopaths are really good liars, so that might be something to brag about. I don't know, but...
Which, on that note, by the way, the most recent series of Doctor Who, or not Doctor Who, but Sherlock, where Sherlock Holmes is, I'm a highest functioning sociopath. Like, it's so, I'm just like, that's fucking annoying. That show has degraded a bit in my mind because of that. That is the same thing I'm talking about. Like, that doesn't make you cool, god damn it. But there you have it.
And mostly a sociopath, even if they were aware of it, which generally, people are not aware of that kind of thing, you kind of think, however, you are normal. But they're not going to identify, they're not going to show their cards like that. Mm-hmm. It's like saying, I'm a very good liar, I'm a very good con man. Yeah, the people that are don't make these kind of announcements.
Yeah, I would think you wouldn't announce that unless you were trying not to be that. Like, I recognize I'm this thing, and I don't want to be this thing, so...
No, that's the other thing, is they don't have the clinically significant distress that compels someone to seek treatment. A lot of the access to and things like sociopathy, it's like, excuse me, if someone's a sociopath or a psychopath, they don't present for treatment because they are not in distress. They cause other people distress, but they themselves are fine with what they do, and that's part of the disease. So they don't come to you and say, oh, please help me, I'm upset about this thing. I took an online survey and it turns out I'm a sociopath. No, what they say is, I'm fine, I don't need to go to treatment, and they get rid of the person who's making the issue out of it. If they present for treatment, it's because they're in the criminal justice system. It's because they're being forced to by employment. For instance, if they have to take a psychological screening before getting a job or whatever, but they don't come and say, I'm in distress. That's just by nature. Much like the people that don't feel physical pain, they don't feel the psychological pain. That would be normal.
Let's go through a quick list of honorable mentions that we aren't going to discuss at length. Cotard syndrome, where a person believes that their body has actually died, and I guess they believe they're a consciousness inhabiting an already deceased corpse. Body identity integrity disorder, where a person has an overwhelming feeling that life would be so much better as an amputee. There's a link in the notes here to, quote, some Yahoo injected feces behind his knee so he could get an infection that would require amputation. It didn't work, so he used a table saw. I haven't looked at this yet. I intend to. Wendigo psychosis, where a person experiences an insatiable craving for human flesh while simultaneously fearing becoming a cannibal. That is some fucked up cognitive dissonance right there.
And joining me now is 2 dogs and my sister.
From the Donner Party. Foreign accent syndrome, where a person following a severe brain injury begins speaking with an uncharacteristic newfound foreign accent.
Right,
so I could bump my head tomorrow and start sounding like Erno. That would actually.
Hello, Governor.
Glovna?
Governor. Hello, Governor.
Trichotillomania, where a person feels an urge to pull their hair out.
Trichotillomania, that is not funny at all. I mean, I'm not saying don't make jokes, but I'm saying in real life, this is someone suffering. I had a professor with this, and this is a form of suffering, and it is so difficult to quit because if you're trying to avoid drugs or alcohol, there's this other object you need to avoid. This is a matter of stopping, it's like stopping biting your nails, stopping something that is constantly physically present and for which you're constantly triggered, and talking about it and getting stressed out about it or humiliated about it, which is what happens to these people, triggers further trichotillomania. It's a terrible vicious cycle, and these are often very brilliant people. These are people with PhDs in physics, PhDs in math, who speak several languages. I've known several of these people, and it is awful that they're suffering because they do contribute to society, and they are kind, warm-hearted, sane people.
Although some of these sound humorous, I think it's worth recognizing that anyone suffering from any of these disorders is suffering, or people around them are suffering.
And I think Hollywood does these people a lot of disservice, since they usually play crazy people out as funny. So.
Yeah, I know that the whole hair pulling thing. There's other similar disorders. Like I know there's people who talk about how they constantly chew on the skin around the cuticles of their fingers and the tips of their fingers and things like that.
Autophagia.
And they seem to be pretty commonly comorbid with other things like bulimia or anorexia and things like that.
Next is Mary Hart syndrome, where a person experiences seizures upon hearing the voice of Mary Hart.
Hi, my name is Mary Hart.
Now, I had never heard of this before researching, and I apologize for how funny it is. I really don't. It is funny. I mean, it's terrible, but it's funny. And these. It bears noting these are apparently people who already had some seizure disorders, but something about Mary Hart's voice with these particular people triggered seizures. It's kind of funny and terrible at the same time.
Do they have any idea why?
I did not see any particular reasons why, or nothing conclusive. That doesn't mean there isn't a better answer, but I didn't see any in the research I did.
Wikipedia says that Mary Hart is an American television personality and was the long-running host of the syndicated gossip and entertainment roundup program Entertainment Tonight from '82 to 2011. So,
to me, is
this the person we're talking about?
That is the one. Yeah.
Wow. And apparently people had seizures when they heard her voice. I'm going to have to listen to
her voice. And she's just a regular person. She's not someone with a unique voice or whatever. She has the kind of, anchor journalist kind of a voice. And she's very much like a Vanna White, very plain, there's nothing really extraordinary about her. I mean, she's beautiful and famous and all that, but there's nothing that you would go, oh, yeah, I could see how that would trigger someone, It's not like Fran Drescher. I could see how that voice would trigger seizures, but but she doesn't have a voice like that, or Harvey Fierstein, or someone with a unique voice. She's just your run-of-the-mill Midwestern, not even an accent. She's just very plain.
It's Entertainment Tonight, the show where the famous Bill O'Reilly clip of "We'll do it live, fuck it" came from.
I don't know.
It was kind of tabloid. They would do things like that. They would show, humiliating things from celebrities or embarrassing, kind of TMZ, but it was before.
No,
TMZ.
This was. Well, I won't go into the long explanation.
He certainly was not on that show.
Oh, he was not. Okay, then that's.
I don't think so. No, no. But they would show TMZ.
This is an outtake.
It was Inside Edition.
Inside Edition. This is an outtake that's gained some notoriety over the years, and it's pretty funny.
Fucking
Our
thing
next one-
sucks.
Yeah. Paris syndrome, exclusively suffered by Japanese tourists, and it's a form of culture shock when expectations of the city don't live up to the reality. So I guess like I've watched all these shows and read these things, heard these things about Paris and how wonderful the people are, how great of an experience it'll be, and you go there and find out it's just a big city like anywhere else, and there's people that are disinterested or just plain rude, and there's this culture shock that apparently people just have to be evacuated from the city for. It's crazy. Boanthropy, where a person believes himself or herself to be an ox or a cow, leading to things like chewing on grass in the yard. Autophagia, which we mentioned a minute ago, where a person impulsively bites or chews on themselves, can be as mild as I chew on my fingernails to I bite pieces of myself and chew them, like bite chunks out of my skin and chew them, which sounds horrible. Alien hand syndrome, where a person's hand, generally the left, if I recall correctly, appears to have a mind of its own and its own motivations. Some smart ass put in the show notes. Have you ever given yourself a stranger? That would certainly be one way to do it. No, baby, it's my alien hand. I don't know what this is all about. I'm sorry.
No.
I saw a video the other day of some guy shooting a 4-gauge shotgun, which is enormous and knocks this guy backwards. And one of my buddies was like, "Oh, that would make my shoulder numb for days." And I was like, a numb shoulder might lead to. Yeah, never mind. Anyway, stranger, anyone? Nothing. Moving on. Lima syndrome. Lima syndrome, which is the opposite of Stockholm syndrome, wherein a hostage taker becomes sympathetic to the hostages.
Wait, John, aren't you an expert on weird sexual fetishes and practices? Do tell us about the stranger. I'm unfamiliar.
I had this coming, didn't I? Okay, so the stranger, as I understand it, is where you will sit on your hand for some period of time until your hand goes numb, falls asleep, masturbate, and it's like somebody else giving you a hand job. For any other insight into strange sexual perversions and practices, contact me at feedback@irreverentskeptics.com or just Google search, because it's everywhere. It's the internet, right? So quickly before I finish the rest of these, we have a couple more Q&As. Kierman asked us, who the devil is Mary Hart? I think we addressed that. That's host of Entertainment Tonight. Jacob Eitner said, I believe Sherlock says that he is a high-functioning sociopath in the books. I don't know. I haven't read them in a long time.
He did say it in Sherlock. I don't know if he says it in the books, though. It's been a while since I've read those.
Was that a diagnosed disorder by the time those were written?
I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, they knew about it. They called them psychopaths, or there might have been another word, but they were aware throughout history that there were these people without conscience. Even if they didn't understand how to treat it or what to do, it was at least there was some awareness. I mean, psychology is only like 100 years old, but yeah, the literature and history will tell you that, yeah, there's something about the certain breed of people that is different from everybody else.
Well, I don't retract my frowning at the show anyway. So next is Stendhal syndrome, where a person has an adverse reaction to art. So there's that. So, oh, look at that lovely painting. My head. I don't know.
Sounds like Republicans.
Aren't you a Republican?
I'm a conservative, not a Republican.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Sorry. I was going to ask if there's a difference, but that's another show. That's a whole other trolling topic right there. So. And lastly, reduplicative paramnesia, where a person believes that places or locations are duplicates of the actual place or location.
So
this is kind of a locational or situational form of capgrass. Like,
so what if
this
you have
looks
both?
like my house, but this isn't actually my house. Yeah, what if you do have?
I mean, what if you get home one day and you think your house and your wife have been replaced by duplicates?
I'd say go with it, but I suppose you would actually be feeling like this is a very traumatic thing. My thought is just run with it then. Oh, this is all different. All right.
That would be so interruptive to your life.
Groundhog Day, anyone? I don't know.
But you write books and then talk about how the space aliens or the U.S. government switched everybody in my house, and they're now watching me. I mean, that seems to be a common amongst the weirdest conspiracies.
Well, what if Neil Armstrong would have had this? oh, this is not the set. This is the actual movie. God damn it!
He forgot that it was in a soundstage somewhere.
Yeah.
Soundstage 51.
This isn't Palo Alto. What are we doing here? All right, so moving on to our whats.
What?
What? So
What?
our first what comes to
Eita.
us from Brandy. Man, there's a link in the show notes. You have to go look at this. Man's DIY
God.
sex doll is just, well...
It's horrifying. I'm not
It
looking
is.
down on anyone. Let me start off with, I'm not looking down on anyone for what they do. They want to
Get your
masturbate.
rocks
As long
off.
as it doesn't
Don't
hurt
hurt
anybody,
nobody.
that's fine. Okay, past that. Okay, the disclaimer said they actually sell sex dolls that are just, tacky and gross, plastic, whatevers. But this thing that this guy has crafted, you have to go see. Otherwise, these comments don't make any sense. It is horrifying. It is duct tape. It is, I don't know what all. It is just a nasty, scary, horrifying, not even sort of humanoid thing. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just awful.
It's
giant,
it's the
blocky,
Frankenstein
angular-
monster of
It kind
sex
of-
dolls.
Tubes for
It kind
limbs.
of, to me, looks like an elementary or junior high school attempt at making
A
a mannequin
zombie.
out of paper mache,
A
but then
mannequin,
on
yeah.
top of that, it's got like really big
Okay.
Conical
homemade fake
boobs.
boobs.
So
It's got a
if-
CoverGirl magazine ad taped over for the face and a pair of, I don't know what brand shoes those are. It actually has running shoes on.
It's scary.
If I talk and nobody else talks right now, I'll pop my image up on for the Hangout. So I pulled up the sex doll picture here. This is horrifying. It's like covered in packaging, masking tape or something, and it's the breasts look like water balloons that have been covered in tape. And here's the penetrate the love hole here for you. Oh God, filling it with. Oh no, I don't know if I want to keep scrolling here.
So for our viewers,
Oh no!
so
Oh
for our
God!
current viewers, I'd just like to ask in our Q&A, just answer us with, would you hit that?
It's got interchangeable magazine cover faces here. I love it. In this
Who
one
wouldn't
photograph,
hit
the left breast has fallen off, I guess, from vigorous use. Oh no, that's horrifying. Oh my God.
You know what I thought as soon as I saw this? After I went, what? It puts the lotion on its skin. That's immediately what I thought of. Is like, that's the kind of person who made this thing. It puts the lotion on its skin.
So
Would you fuck me?
that it hurts.
Oh my God!
You wanna do it in the butt? In that butt?
Oh God.
It's all downhill from here.
I am very sorry, Mrs. Emmy. Very, very sorry. I promise you, I'm not a terrible
And a
person.
belated Ada go to bed.
Yeah. Oh my God. If you're not traumatized, oh my God, go to therapy, then go to bed.
So our next what comes to us from Right Wing Watch Video via YouTube, and good old Skeletor Pat Robertson. Pat Robertson explains define genocide. So Michael McElroy, tell us about that.
Oh yeah, somebody writes in and says, "Hey, I was reading the part of the Bible that talks about all the killing and the genocides and such that went on in the Old Testament, and that sounds like Islam to me." So setting aside the whole anti-Islam remark, because we'll just set that aside for the purposes of this. Pat Robertson's response is kind of fantastic. He says, assuming you have a culture that has 1,000 really bad people in it. Okay. Assuming you have a culture that has 1,000 really bad people in it, they're murderers, they're thieves, they're rapists, they're having incest, you name it, they're doing everything horrible. Now, if they have children, what's going to happen? Instead of having 1,000, you'll have 3,000 or 4,000. Then nothing has changed them. Then they'll pass it on to the next generation. The next thing you know, you got 10,000 or 20,000 of them, and it keeps going. You're going to have 1 million of them. So what's the most merciful thing for a loving God to do? It's to take 1,000 and get rid of them, and that's what he did. You're welcome.
It's like logarithmic perversion. That's what that is right there.
Right. But so this story is mind-blowing on several levels, which I have gone into some detail here. First of all, let's talk about the lie about how he only took these 1,000 people and got rid of them in the Bible story. If you actually read the Bible story, it's in 1 Samuel 15, verses 2 and 3. Thus says the Lord of hosts, I have noted what Amalek did to Israel in opposing them on the way when they came up out of Egypt. Now go and strike Amalek and devote to destruction all that they have. Do not spare them, but kill both man and woman and infant, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. So he's not finding just the bad guys. He's telling them, kill all of those motherfuckers. And their property and their animals. Everything. So, you know, his explanation makes no sense. So second of all, how is this not describing America today? He's talking about how there are people who are there's murderers, thieves, rapists, and incest going on, and because of this, these people were wiped out. And
I'd just like to note that not only in this video, but in a number of videos, Pat Robertson's very
yellow.
I don't know if it's
he looks
He
yellowy
doesn't know
orange.
where he is. He's very relaxed. He has no idea where
Well,
he
I was
is.
going to say he mentions rape and incest and homosexuality so often. It's like I'm just saying
kind of
he's a little
obsessed.
obsessed with something. Like,
But
he probably remembers back when his penis worked right and he could.
Oh
Yeah.
god.
Is this the genocide where God? Wait, is this the genocide where God says specifically cut the babies out of their bellies? Is it that one? Because how could the
Aren't they
babies
all?
inside the bellies? No, but there's one where it goes into graphic detail about cut them out of their mothers.
Drive your
and
sword
stuff.
through the stomach of a pregnant woman. Yeah.
If
But
it's not this genocide, it's another one.
And it's so many times through the Old Testament, God either kills people directly or just tells his people to kill people. And we're supposed to believe that he only killed the bad people. Well, what the fuck happened in the flood, you know? He floods the entire planet. Babies die. Are these babies evil enough to deserve?
Right,
Whatever.
and the animals, just now you said the animals die? I mean, what did they do wrong? They're
Look,
automatically innocent.
And
Skeletor here just gave us the math about how the
it's exponential.
evil exponentially grows, and so obviously those were evil babies. Evil
So
parents,
it's
evil
also a
baby.
nice
I mean,
bit of
you're
fatalism
kind of
here.
assuming that rape, incest, and thievery are
Genetic?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the other thing is that he's basically saying people have no free will. That these people deserve to be killed as infants because they will grow up to be these evil people. And also, he touches on, in a different part that I didn't quote, he touches on how the people of Amalek or wherever were sacrificing their children, offering their children as sacrifices to their gods. Abraham did that with his son to Pat Robertson's God. And
Yeah,
somehow
but in that case, God said to do it, so it was okay.
Right. Well, that doesn't really solve the problem, because there was another guy later in the Bible. I'm trying to remember his name offhand here, who he was some big general who promised God that if God helped him win a battle, that he would offer the first thing to come from his house as a sacrifice, a burnt sacrifice to God.
Yeah,
And
that's
lo and
right. He
behold,
had to offer up. Yeah.
He wins the battle, and his daughter is the first thing to come out of the house, and he does it.
Yeah, he does it. He actually goes through with it, and God's sitting there happy
God
and
is
loves the
pleased
smell
with
of
it.
blood. Yeah,
And
God
later in the
loves it.
Bible,
Loves the
he's
smell of blood.
quoted, he's cited as
Of course,
an
God
example
was
of a
happy.
person
Of course,
swinging the
God was
faith.
happy because he burned a female. We all know God's not big on females. Come on.
Well, at least whatever came out of his house was worthless. Look at it that way. It could have been something important, you know.
I wonder if Pat Roberts would be okay with the justice system killing the whole family of rapist or thief, just so that their 3 children won't
just in case they don't
commit the
grow up to
same
do it
crime.
themselves. Yeah.
I bet he would, especially if they were gay or Islamic.
Yeah, I mean, what gets me about this is that when you bring up this story, his name is Jephthah, and when you bring up this story, they say, well, he did this. God didn't want to take his sacrifice, but he did it anyway. But you look later in the New Testament, you find stories about where they talk about all these paragons of faith and how they are examples to follow, and Jephthah is mentioned as one of them. So,
and it's said at least once in the Bible that God loves the smell of blood. It talks about how he rejoices in the offerings.
Burning
flesh and blood, yeah. So
it's pleasing to his.
There you go.
Everybody knows that God loves himself a good barbecue.
Yep. The other thing that gets me is Pat Robertson says that what's the most merciful thing for a loving God to do? It's to take the 1,000 and get rid of them. Really? A loving God, the most merciful thing he can do. A supernatural, all-powerful God.
Yeah, he couldn't make them. If they were evil, he couldn't make them not evil.
Right. This is his solution to everything massive human tragedy? I mean, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah,
works for me.
He can't.
So I think we can all agree.
Died so we could have Friday.
I think we can all agree.
On Friday.
What? So our last what? Oh God, this is terrible. So students at Carondelet High School for Girls in Concord in Northern California were offered a menu of fried chicken, cornbread, and watermelon to celebrate Black History Month.
What?
I want
I just
to
want
be
to
the
say
first
on
to
behalf
comment
of
on this one.
I just
Even
want to
as a
say on
film,
behalf of
I know
behalf of all of us of all of us who have a half a
that's
brain,
racist.
we white people facepalm. That's what I want to say. Like, for fuck's sake, really?
He said while not physically doing it.
Well, I didn't want to smudge my glasses. That would be a level of commitment I don't know that I'm up for.
First world problems.
That's right. I have to clean them and all that. Oh, for God's sakes.
What the fuck, man?
What?
And apparently this is a private Christian school, too. It's not...
There's the shocker.
Yeah, right. And they said... And the black student union at the school, I guess, said that this is kind of offensive. It's like, oh, hey, the administration never thought this through and thought maybe this is a little offensive?
They probably have a plurality of black students, mostly black, I suppose, because it's a private Christian school.
Right. It's definitely not a bunch of rich white people.
What you did there, I see it. So any other thoughts on this
Jesus
clusterfuck? What?
Fucking A, man.
So there's that.
I could
All
go
right.
for some watermelon.
Our last segment is a follow-up to our First World Problems show. Dumbass has something to share with us, so take it away, Dumbass.
Yes.
All right. Well, I found this link, a BuzzFeed link, to the 21 absolute worst things in the world, and so poverty, starvation, child rape, not on the list. So all of these things, keep in mind, are worse than any of that stuff. So we got it's done in pictures, but what we've got here is stuff like glasses of milk where the glass is too narrow to fit the chocolate chip cookie. That is terrible.
Agreed.
Wow, man. That's terrible.
Pizza snacks that when you bake them, they leak out. The stuffing leaks out of them.
Worse than genocide.
Much worse than genocide. That's right. Now we got cords that get caught in the wheel of your chair.
Happens to me at work all the time. I cry. I feel pain.
Let's scroll down a few here. Toothpaste tubes that you have to twist to get the toothpaste out.
That one looks like just like I'm too stupid to operate a tube of toothpaste is what that looks like to me. I can see how being that retarded would be the worst thing in the world. And I can see how I was just very offensive then. So yeah, there's that.
Hangnails, Pringles cans that you can't reach your fingers into.
That's an atrocity.
See, with hands my size, I don't understand that dilemma at all.
What, do you have tiny baby hands?
No, I was being sarcastic. I have ginormous hands. And yeah, yes. Hands in a Pringle can. I haven't been able to do that since I was 10, I think. So.
Yeah, that's one of my problems. I can't. I bought a Nintendo 3DS when it originally came out, and I couldn't play it because my hands are too big.
Abomination.
Plugs that cover more than one socket on your surge protector.
Not quite as bad as child molestation.
Yeah, not as bad as child rape, but still a problem. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
There should probably be some kind of UN actions taken to fix that.
When you're asleep, but you have to pee, but you're really comfortable.
So why get up? Do it where you are.
Yep.
That's why I sleep.
Is that not what everyone does? Oh.
Well, you're going to be warm for a moment at least, right?
See?
Hopefully the moment lasts as long as you need to fall asleep again.
Yeah, just as long as you fall asleep before you realize what you've done.
Binder rings that don't match.
Almost as bad as Mel Gibson movies.
Yeah. And finally, the black-eyed peas.
The worst thing this planet has ever produced. Period. I fucking hate that band.
The worst thing ever. We're talking like Hitler and Stalin and genocide and like.
Yep.
Absolutely.
You would rather listen to Pat Robertson than a Black Eyed Peas album, is what you just told me.
Yes. And I would rather watch the Ben Stein movie, whatever that shithole fucking movie crap is.
Expelled or whatever.
Yeah, that one.
Expelled, no intelligence allowed.
I don't even know what this is.
You don't? Oh, you haven't heard? It's an intelligent design movie that talks about
yeah.
evolution was
Evolution.
behind Hitler and racism and.
Oh yeah.
Where this
Guess
brilliant
why I
economist
haven't watched this?
spews anti-evolution nonsense. I thought I was near stroke level, honestly. I don't know if I've ever been so angry, and I've been through a divorce. I don't know if I've ever been that angry. I felt like
I think
there were
that
changes in my skull that were not safe.
I think that the clip you might have seen on YouTube that's kind of gone around of Richard Dawkins being ambushed with a question about are there any mechanisms in evolution which can increase information, that comes from that, and the question, like they came to him saying that they wanted to interview him about science and evolution and all this, and then they suddenly sprung him with all these creationist propaganda questions, and edited out the part where he actually responds to it.
Sure, and they film like up his nose. They try to make him look like a troll, essentially. It's just awful.
Yeah, the whole documentary is basically selectively editing people who talk about evolution. And
I think P.Z. Myers is in that one too. A couple of famous atheists fell for their ruse.
Yeah, P.Z. Myers was actually in the movie, and then when he went to the premiere of the movie, he was kicked out of the theater. So he was expelled from Expelled.
And Richard Dawkins didn't get, they didn't catch him because, like a lot of British people, he has a different first name that he uses, and so when he showed his
Clinton,
ID,
Richard
whatever,
Dawkins.
he got it, no problem.
Yeah, but I think they missed the worst one on that list. It's the thing when you go commando and you get your pubic hairs stuck into the zipper.
Oh,
That's
Jesus
the worst
God! Trim it, man, trim it.
Manscaping.
Did you not get the memo? Who has pubic hair in 2014?
thing. Vikings.
Well,
Mental
all right,
pictures, oh God.
So before we end the show, want to say quickly in the Q&A, Ilya Supa, Hassam Absi, and Fox Games all say hello, so hello back to all of you, and we're doing fine, etc., etc.
Howdy.
Ryan Pendergrass says nasty, and I'm assuming he's either talking about the sex doll story or that
Yeah,
we
I
watched the
think so.
video of Pat Robertson. I agree, that is quite nasty.
Was my impression so good that you remember it as watching
God,
a video?
that was awesome. That was so awesome.
Yeah. Now we just need to find Sylvia Brown.
So, Mike Bowler, what you got coming up next on Skeptic's Guide to Conspiracy and/or the Bitch Spot Report?
Actually, I split the 9/11 show that we did last week into 2 shows, so I'm good for the month. So, and I don't think we're going to do.
Did you manage to
Heretic.
deal with the fact that you lost half of your recording?
I went to the YouTube. I found it. I was able to pull an MP3. I just went ahead and edited it. So I'm ready. I'm also got our show ready to go on our site. So it's
Excellent.
Marvelous.
Smack
So-
that bitch up. Smack
Yeah.
that bitch up.
yeah.
Yeah, we've just about got this down to an actual like weekly release type of deal. We're
Yep.
almost there.
I've finished up two episodes editing, and I'm finishing up a third one today for our First World Problems show. So
And I'm trying to
And I'm
bribe
still
someone.
struggling with mine.
Trying to bribe someone to do gun control for me since I fucked it all up and have to
Oh,
start
and
all
Mike,
over,
we
so.
heard you on Cognitive Dissonance. Way to go, pimping our show
Yes.
like that. It was awesome.
Yes.
Hey, I know that voice. That's awesome.
I'm wondering how many people got my 3/5 compromise joke.
Oh, I totally did. I was like, oh no, he did not just bring. Oh, no. I'm the only one out of us that could. Everyone else is white. So.
I was driving to work, and I recall I was driving to work when you said that. I just busted out laughing at an intersection, cars around me. I was like, I don't care. That was funny as fuck. So, dumbass, what you got coming up next? When's the next Dumbass Guide to Knowledge episode?
Yeah, I'll get that out soon. Eventually I'll get there. Just been going through a lot of stuff and been trying to do a whole lot. But we've got an Amateur Skeptics coming out really soon. Going to be a really good one. I really enjoy doing that one. And we just had the thing that both me and Mike participated in, the Exposing Pseudo-Astronomy 100th episode. That just came out, so that'll be interesting if you guys want to go down and listen to that.
Nice.
He did a 2-parter on that. So.
Yeah,
That's a great show.
Yeah, I made it to the outtakes too. That was way cool on that one. On the second show, I got Carl to kind of stumble on the big gardener snake conspiracy. So
It's spreading,
Nice.
man.
Teach the controversy. So
Yes.
next week on
Gardner
Irreverent Skeptics, This week we were going to take a few minutes just to talk about the Ken Ham and Bill Nye debate, but we've decided that's going to be, if not an entire episode, at least a big part of the next episode. So we're going to talk about when skeptics and atheists squabble with creationists and intelligent
Called the
designers.
Strawman Army. And I already have it registered as my band name.
As I watched that debate live with my girlfriend this week, and as I was watching it, she told me, "Oh my God, this is your Super Bowl," because I kept screaming at the television.
That's pretty much true. That was more interesting than the Super Bowl.
Which was a terrible game.
I've watched a good part of that. I will rewatch what I already watched and watch the rest of it before next week's show. So that's going to do it for us for this week. So thank you everyone who's still watching us, and thanks everyone who did watch and who will listen to this in the future. Have a good week, and we will see you soon.
And remember, we didn't talk about the Brian Dunning because we're too scared.
Oh, Jesus.